That feeling when you're cruising down an open highway, the miles melting away, and you sense this incredible connection to every corner of the country, it's powerful, right?
Absolutely.
But have you ever paused to consider the surprisingly rich and, well, complex story behind those very roads?
It is a remarkable tale, and that's precisely where our deep dive takes us today, into the history of the Dwight D. Eisenhower National System of Interstate and Defense Highways.
Right.
We've explored a wide array of sources, historical analyses, government documents, even some firsthand accounts, to bring you the key historical developments and the, often unexpected details that shapes this monumental project.
Our mission is to go beyond just the dates and names. We want to unpack the foundational ideas, uncover the pivotal moments, and really understand the enduring legacy of this network that's so, well, deeply woven into the fabric of American life.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Where did the initial concept of a nationally coordinated highway system even emerge?
Well, the first significant push came in the early 20th century. The Federal Aid Road Act of 1916 marked a real turning point.
1916.
Yeah, it was the first time the U.S. Congress allocated funds specifically for roadways, $75 million over 5 years, to be matched by the states.
75 million. Sounds like a lot back then, but maybe not by today's standards.
Right. But it signaled a fundamental shift. Before this, road building was largely a state and local thing.
Uh-huh.
This act indicated the beginning of federal recognition of roads as, like, a national issue. However, the U.S. entering World War I significantly hampered any, widespread implementation.
Ah, okay. So the seed of the idea was planted, but then world events kind of put it on hold.
Pretty much. But the idea of federal involvement didn't just disappear. The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1921, often called the FIPS Act, built on that 1916 foundation.
Okay.
It again provided federal matching funds, this time $75 million annually. But here's where the vision started to sharpen. This act specifically aimed to create a national grid of what were termed primary highways. It fostered a new level of cooperation among the states.
Ah, realizing you couldn't do it piecemeal.
Exactly. Recognizing that a truly connected nation required more than just local road projects.
That makes perfect sense. You can't have a cohesive national network if each state is doing its own thing entirely. And this leads us to the numbered highways, right? Like Route 66.
That's right. In 1926, the United States numbered highway system was established. This was the first real effort to create a national road numbering system for cross-country travel, giving us those famous routes.
But there were limitations.
Oh, definitely. It's crucial to remember these highways were still primarily funded and maintained by individual states.
So varying standards.
Hugely varying standards. National standards for road design and quality were, well, pretty limited. You could easily go from a nice multi-lane road to a narrow, winding two-lane just by crossing a state line, all on the same U.S. highway.
Wow. Talk about a potentially jarring experience for travelers. Okay, so we had this initial federal push, a numbering system, but the actual roads were still pretty inconsistent. When did the idea of, like, superhighways really start to gain traction?
Well, even as those numbered highways were being set up, some people were already thinking bigger, much bigger.
Like who?
Back in 1918, E.J. Marin, who was an editor at Engineering News Record, proposed a 50,000-mile system.
50,000 miles in 1918.
Yeah, with dedicated east-west and north-south routes. And what's fascinating is he clearly saw the dual purpose: commercial transport and military mobility.
Ah, that dual use idea again. Seems important.
It's a recurring theme, definitely. And this early recognition of both civilian and defense needs is pretty significant.
Now, you mentioned a rather challenging cross-country journey by the Army. That sounds like it really highlighted the problems.
It truly did. In 1919, the U.S. Army decided to run a Motor Transport Corps convoy across the Lincoln Highway.
What was the goal?
Basically, to see firsthand how tough it would be for military vehicles to cross the country. The journey from D.C. to San Francisco, just over 3,200 miles, took a staggering 62 days.
62 days? That's incredible. What kinds of problems did they face?
Oh, everything. Dilapidated bridges, constant mechanical breakdowns from the awful road surfaces, engines choked with dust and sand. Just a nightmare.
62 days for a trip that now takes, 4 or 5 days? And incredibly, a young Dwight Eisenhower was actually part of that expedition, wasn't he?
He was indeed, a 28-year-old lieutenant colonel at the time. And that experience, well, it clearly left a huge mark on him.
You can imagine.
He later vividly recalled driving through darkest America with truck and tank, describing the roads out west as just a succession of dust, ruts, pits, and holes.
Wow. That firsthand experience must have stuck with him when he later became president, a powerful motivator.
Absolutely. You can see how that would fuel the desire for something much, much better.
Were there other official acknowledgments of the need for a better system around that time, beyond Ike's personal experience?
Yes. In 1922, the Bureau of Public Roads actually asked the War Department for input on roads critical for national defense.
Okay.
General John J. Pershing, the famous World War I general, responded with what became known as the Pershing Map.
The Pershing Map.
Yeah, it outlined about 20,000 miles of primary highways the military thought were essential for national security. So the defense angle was definitely being formally considered early on.
So the military saw the need, civilian car ownership was booming. Sounds like the pressure for something better was really building in the 20s and 30s.
Precisely. The 1920s saw this huge increase in car ownership, which led to a boom in road construction, but mostly at the state and local level. Think early parkways, that sort of thing.
Right.
But as traffic grew, the limitations of the existing network, largely unconnected, often poorly maintained, became painfully obvious. The need for a truly integrated national system, something way beyond the existing numbered highways, was becoming undeniable.
And then we start to see more concrete proposals emerge, leading up eventually to the interstate system we know. Roosevelt even sketched out some ideas.
He did. In 1938, FDR, recognizing this growing need, actually gave Thomas McDonald, head of the Bureau of Public Roads, a hand-drawn map.
Really? A hand-drawn map?
Yeah, showing 8 potential superhighway corridors for future study. A big step towards formal planning at the top.
Okay.
And following that, Herbert S. Fairbank, a key figure at the Bureau, wrote a couple of really pivotal reports. Toll roads and free roads in 1939, and maybe even more important, interregional highways in 1944.
And that 1944 report was significant.
Very. It's widely seen as the first formal, comprehensive description of what would become the interstate system. It laid out a lot of the core principles and design features.
So the idea had been brewing for decades. Various people, different administrations saw the need. But it really sounds like Eisenhower's unique mix of that 1919 convoy experience and seeing the German Autobahn. That was the real catalyst.
That's absolutely the case. President Eisenhower became the indispensable champion. That 1919 convoy experience, seeing how bad American roads were, that stuck with him. He often talked about the wisdom of broader ribbons across our land.
And the Autobahn influence.
Hugely influential. As Supreme Commander in WWII, he saw Germany's Autobahn system up close. He recognized its strategic importance for moving troops and supplies quickly. That image of a high-speed, limited-access network really resonated.
You can see how that would appeal to a military leader like him. So how did he translate that vision, shaped by those experiences, into actual action?
Well, in 1954, he took a key step. He appointed General Lucius D. Clay to head a committee.
Clay? Okay.
Their job was to develop a concrete proposal for an interstate system.
Right.
Clay laid out the rationale really clearly. Safety, obviously, with more cars on the road, national defense in the Cold War context, and, importantly, future economic growth. It wasn't just about public works.
And their plan was ambitious, I take it.
Oh, yeah. They proposed a massive 10-year, $100 billion program.
$100 billion in the 1950s.
Exactly. A staggering sum. The goal was about 40,000 miles of divided, limited-access highways connecting all cities over 50,000 people. A truly national network.
Now, I remember hearing that initially the idea was to fund it mostly with tolls. What changed that?
Yeah, it was Eisenhower's initial leaning, yeah. A user-pays model, perhaps.
Yeah.
But General Clay argued pretty persuasively against relying mainly on tolls.
Why?
He pointed out tolls would likely only work well in the densely populated coastal areas. They wouldn't connect the vast interior of the country effectively.
Ah, okay.
He convinced Eisenhower that they needed a more comprehensive funding plan for a truly national system. So in February 1955, Eisenhower sent Clay's proposal, favoring broader funding, to Congress.
And that kicked off the legislative process. Never simple.
Definitely not. The Senate actually passed it fairly quickly, with good bipartisan support, but it hit roadblocks in the House.
What was the issue there?
House Democrats raised concerns about the initial plan to finance it using public bonds. That became a sticking point.
So how did they resolve it?
Ultimately, they reached a crucial compromise. Eisenhower and the House Democrats agreed on a different funding mechanism, the Highway Trust Fund.
The gas tax.
Exactly. A dedicated fund supported by a federal gasoline tax. That ensured a consistent revenue stream for this massive project.
A dedicated funding source.
Yeah.
Key move. And finally, June 1956, it becomes law.
Correct. June 1956, Eisenhower signed the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956. That was the moment. The federal government committed to paying 90% of the cost.
90%. Unprecedented.
Truly. States picked up the other 10%. And the act set those crucial design standards. Had to be a freeway, minimum 4 lanes, no at-grade crossings, no traffic lights, no cross streets cutting across the main lanes.
That standardization was huge compared to the old numbered roads.
A radical departure meant consistent, high-quality roads nationwide.
And even as the law was being finalized, there was already a map, right? The Yellow Book.
Yeah, in 1955, even before the act was signed, the General Location of National System of Interstate Highways came out, informally called the Yellow Book. It gave that initial blueprint to general routes. And interestingly, Charles Irwin Wilson, who was head of GM at the time, and later Ike's Secretary of Defense, he was involved in some early planning, shows that link between industry and infrastructure back then.
So the plan's there, the funding's set. Construction must have started pretty quickly after that. Where were the first projects? Always a bit of debate there, right?
Yes, there is. Missouri and Kansas both have strong claims. Missouri says the first 3 contracts under the new program were signed on August 10th, 1956.
For which roads?
Upgrading part of U.S. Route 66 to what's now I-44. And they also started work on U.S. 40, which became part of I-70 later that same month.
Okay, Missouri's claim is the contracts. What about Kansas?
Kansas argues they were the first state to actually start paving after the 56 Act was signed.
Ah, the paving.
Right. Missouri might have signed contracts earlier, but Kansas had some preliminary engineering done already. So they started paving their section of I-70 on September 26, 1956. And they put up signs calling it the first project completed under provisions of Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956.
So a close race to get started, and we should probably mention the Pennsylvania Turnpike, too. Sort of the grandfather.
Absolutely. Definitely worth mentioning. While it wasn't built under the 56 Act, it opened way back in 1940.
Right.
It's widely nicknamed the grandfather of the interstate system. Now parts of I-70 and I-76. It was that early successful example of a limited access, multi-lane toll highway. Showed it could be done.
So the first steps in the mid-50s, but building the whole thing, that took a while, didn't it? Decade.
Oh, a massive undertaking. Scanned several decades. Nebraska gets the nod for being the first state to finish all its mainline interstates, finishing I-80 within its borders in 1974.
Okay.
The entire Canada-to-Mexico route, I-5, wasn't fully complete until 79 in California. And coast-to-coast I-80 San Francisco to near New York City, that was finally finished in Utah in 1986.
Utah, huh?
Yeah, and get this, the completion point was only about 50 miles from Promontory Summit.
Where they finished the Transcontinental Railroad.
Exactly, almost 120 years earlier. A powerful echo, connecting the nation again.
That parallel is really striking. What about the other big coast-to-coast routes, I-10 and I-90?
Right, I-10, Santa Monica to Jacksonville, Florida, that was completed in 1990 with the Papago Freeway Tunnel opening in Phoenix.
And that one had some issues.
Yeah, that section faced significant local opposition, a sort of freeway revolt, which caused big delays.
And I-90, Seattle to Boston.
That finished in 1991. The last piece was an elevated viaduct bypassing Wallace, Idaho.
Wallace, Idaho. There's a story there, too, isn't there?
There is. The residents actually fought successfully to get their downtown declared a historic district to stop the original interstate alignment from going right through it.
Wow.
And when the bypass finally opened, they held a mock funeral for the town's last stoplight.
Huh. That's great. Shows a local impact. So the official completion of the original system came shortly after that, early 90s.
Yes, the original plan system was officially proclaimed complete in October 1992. The final piece was I-70 through Glenwood Canyon in Colorado.
Glenwood Canyon, I've heard that's spectacular.
It's considered an engineering marvel. Tons of bridges, tunnels, all designed carefully to minimize environmental impact in that really rugged terrain. Also one of the most expensive rural highway segments ever built, per mile.
So the initial cost estimate, $25 billion over 12 years. How did that compare to the final tally?
Well, it ultimately ballooned to about $114 billion over 35 years.
Wow. Really underscores the scale and complexity. But even after that 1992 completion, there were still some gaps, right? Missing links in the original plan?
That's correct. Despite the official proclamation, 2 of the original big routes, I-95 and I-70, weren't actually continuous for quite a while.
Why was that?
Mostly local opposition that stopped the necessary connections. The famous I-95 gap in New Jersey, because they canceled the Somerset Freeway that was only finally closed in 2018. Decades later.
2018. Incredible.
And I-70. I-70 still has that weird discontinuity in Pennsylvania near Breezewood.
Oh, yeah, Breezewood. You have to get off the interstate.
Exactly.
Okay.
Due to old funding rules and local resistance, they were worried about losing business traffic on I-70 has to exit, drive a short bit on US 30, then get back on the interstate. It's still the only original route with a break like that.
Fascinating how those local battles and historical quirks persist. And the system isn't static, is it? It keeps changing. Expansions, additions, even removals.
Absolutely. It's constantly evolving. We've seen lots of expansions, new routes like I-49 and I-69 with long-term plans for big extensions. There's the proposed I-11 to link Phoenix and Vegas directly.
And removals.
Well, reconsideration maybe. There are serious discussions, for instance, about possibly demolishing and rethinking I-81 where it cuts through Syracuse, New York because of its impact on the city.
We mentioned the freeway revolts earlier. Clearly, it wasn't always smooth sailing getting these built.
You're absolutely right. Political opposition, community concerns, they led to cancellations or major rerouting in lots of cities. Memphis saw I-40 rerouted. D.C. stopped I-66 inside the city.
Baltimore's highway to nowhere.
That's the famous one, yeah. Part of I-70 that just stops.
Yeah.
New York City canceled several planned routes. San Francisco rerouted I-80. Boston famously pushed I-95 onto the Route 128 Beltway.
It really shows the tension between grand plans and local impact.
Definitely. These examples highlight that complex interplay.
So, when the system did take shape, what were the key design features, the operational things that really set it apart from the older roads?
The big thing was nationally unified standards. Construction, signs, everything. A huge contrast to the old U.S. numbered highways.
And physically.
Key features were controlled access only on and off at interchanges, physical barriers or medians separating traffic, breakdown lanes, and critically, no at-grade intersections or traffic lights on the main travel lanes.
All designed for speed and safety.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maximize safety, efficiency, and speed. Deliberate engineering choices. And the numbering system, odd for north-south, even for east-west. Yeah. Most people know the basics, but there's more to it.
Precisely. Primary routes get 1 or 2 digits. Odd for north-south, increasing west to east, like I-5 on the west coast, I-95 on the east.
Right.
Even numbers for east-west, increasing south to north, I-10 down south, I-90 up north. Those ending in 5 or 00 are usually major cross-country routes.
And the 3-digit ones.
Auxiliaries. First digit odd, usually a spur branching off to a city or something, dead-ending. First digit even. Usually a loop or beltway around a city connecting back at multiple points.
Oh, there are exceptions.
Oh, sure. No I-50 or I-60 to avoid confusion with U.S. highways. And you still see some divided routes like I-35W and I-35E, though they try to avoid those now.
Got it. And the mile markers and exit numbers seems pretty standard now.
Generally, yeah. Mile markers start at the south or west state line. Loops usually number clockwise. And most states now use distance-based exits. Exit number matches the nearest mile marker. Makes it easy to figure out distances.
Exactly. Though some places, especially in the Northeast, still have the old sequential numbering exit 1, exit 2, exit 3, regardless of miles.
Right. I've seen that.
And there's the oddball I-19 in Arizona with kilometer-based numbers, a relic of a metric push that never quite happened. Plus, you have business loops and spurs, green shields, taking you into downtowns, the main interstate bypasses.
It really is a remarkably detailed and standardized system. Who actually owns these roads, and how is the upkeep funded now?
The roads themselves and the land they're on are owned by the states they pass through. But as we said, the feds paid for 90% of the initial construction.
And ongoing funding.
Primarily from the Highway Trust Fund. That's mostly funded by federal gas taxes and other fuel taxes. User fees, basically.
But tolls are still part of it.
They are. Many older toll roads were grandfathered in. And now, with maintenance costs rising and fuel tax revenue sometimes struggling, more states are looking at tolls for new projects or major upkeep. Federal rules on tolling interstates have loosened over time.
Okay. And that iconic shield, the red, white, and blue one, instantly recognizable.
It really is. That design came out in 1957, right after the act passed. Trademarked. The color is obviously meant to evoke the flag. It's barely changed since then. You also see those smaller reassurance markers just to remind you you're still on the right route.
Beyond just moving cars and trucks, were there other intended uses? Or maybe unintended ones? I feel like I've heard some urban legends.
Well, military mobility was definitely central from the start. The whole system is part of the strategic highway network for defense needs.
Right.
And they're crucial for disaster evacuations, using contraflow lanes to get people out.
But the legends, like landing planes on them.
Yeah, the idea that every 5th mile is straight enough for an emergency airstrip.
Mm.
or that the main point was nuclear evacuation.
Mhm.
There's just no credible evidence for those. Military needs were important, sure, but civilian transport and the economy were the primary drivers.
Good to clear those up. So, a truly transformative project. Let's wrap up by digging into the lasting impact, the ripple effects on society, culture, the economy. It's huge.
Profound and multi-layered, absolutely. Economically, it fueled the decline of passenger rail, initially freight rail too. Well, trucking just exploded.
Lower shipping costs.
Dramatically lower shipping and travel costs. This enabled massive suburban growth. White flight, unfortunately, was part of that pattern, contributing to segregation. Tourism boomed. The Sun Belt's car-dependent cities really owe their shape to the interstates. Studies show a huge return on investment, big boost to national productivity.
It really redrew the economic map. You mentioned the South and companies like Walmart, FedEx.
Yes, the impact on the South was particularly huge, connecting areas that had weaker road networks before. It helped industries relocate and was key for logistics-heavy companies like Walmart and FedEx. Culturally, it cemented the car's place in American identity, maybe made long drives less of an adventure, more standardized.
But it wasn't all positive, was it? There were major criticisms, serious negative consequences, too.
That's a critical point, absolutely. The system's blamed for harming some downtowns, literally dividing cities. And tragically, construction often destroyed minority neighborhoods.
The displacement numbers are staggering.
They are. Estimates are over 475,000 households, maybe 1 million people, displaced between 57 and 77 alone. Disproportionately minorities. It worsened segregation by creating physical barriers, reduced affordable housing.
And public transit.
Critics say it contributed to the decline of public transit, hurting lower-income folks and minorities who relied on it more. Plus, all those bypass towns and old roads like Route 66 suffered economically. And it arguably entrenched resistance to investing in new public transit later on.
And the impact on minority communities specifically seems particularly harsh.
It often was. Cheaper land in minority areas was sometimes targeted. In some cases, routes seemed deliberately placed to divide white and minority neighborhoods. This limited opportunities, increased pollution exposure, really damaged the social and economic fabric.
A really difficult and important part of the story. Okay, finally, before we close out, any standout stats that really capture the scale of this thing?
Oh, plenty. The busiest section, I-405 in Los Angeles. No surprise there, maybe.
Oh, probably not.
Highest point is I-70 in the Eisenhower Tunnel in Colorado. Lowest land elevation is I-8, down near the New River in California.
Longest routes.
Longest east-west is I-90, over 3,000 miles. Longest north-south is I-95.
Shortest.
Shortest two-digit is I-69W in Laredo, Texas. Shortest auxiliary is I-878 in Queens, NYC, barely over half a mile.
Wow.
Longest stretch within one state is I-10 across Texas. Shortest between states is I-95, I-495 over the Woodrow Wilson Bridge near D.C. Longest shared roadway concurrency is I-80 and I-90 across northern Indiana and Ohio.
And most states served. Most mileage.
I-95 serves the most states,
Mhm.
and Texas has the most total interstate mileage.
Those numbers really paint a picture of the sheer scale. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've gone from early ideas to this vast network, driven by military needs, economic hopes, Eisenhower's vision.
And leaving this huge, complex legacy. Both positive advancements and serious negative consequences we're still grappling with.
It really has reshaped America in profound ways. We've covered the history, the building, the impact.
The engineering, the politics, the social effects. It's a story of ambition, but also one with cautionary tales.
Definitely. So here's a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on. Given the immense, lasting impact of the interstates, what could be the next big infrastructure project to shape the nation so profoundly? Or maybe, reflecting on the downsides, how can we learn from the interstate era as we plan future transportation in cities? Gives you a lot to think about.
It does, and we hope you keep exploring this. Maybe look into the history of the interstates near you or follow the ongoing debates about infrastructure today. There's always more beneath the surface of the roads we drive every day.